أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين كفروا بعضهم أولياء بعض إلا تفعلوه تكن فتنة في الأرض وفساد كبير. In the previous verses, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala made mention of the virtues of the Muhajirin and the Ansar. Here Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. As for those people that make kufr, those that disbelieve in Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, these are guardians, these are friends, these are allies to one another. That although the mushrikeen of Makkah, they were mushrik, they were polytheists, they had a lot of hatred for Ahl Kitab, they hated the Jews, they hated the Christians. But when the Muslim was the common enemy, all of them became allies to one another. They united with one another against the Muslims. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned, إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. That if you do not do that, O believers, that you do not join and become allies of one another, then there will be fitna in the earth, وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ, and great fasad and great corruption. Because kufr is going to get stronger and iman is going to get weaker. The believers are going to get weaker. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آوَوا وَنَصَرُوا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا. Further Allah Ta'ala says, as for those people that brought iman, they made hijrat from Makkah to Mukarramah and they came to Madinah to Munawwara and they strove in the path of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, referring to the Muhajirin of Makkah. وَالَّذِينَ آوَوا وَنَصَرُوا, those that gave them shelter and assisted, they shared with them their properties, their wealth, their wives, everything they shared. Allah Ta'ala says, these are the Ansar. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا. These are the true mu'mineen and the true believers. Who is there today to stand up and say that these are munafiqeen? Who are those that they are saying that these are munafiqeen and they're not true believers? Whereas Quran is saying, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا, that these are true mu'mineen and believers. Quran is testifying to the iman of these people. لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةُ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. For them is forgiveness, وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ, and honorable rizq and sustenance. Allah Ta'ala will grant them in Jannah. Further Allah Ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِن بَعْدُ وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا مَعَكُمْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مِنْكُمْ. As for those people that brought iman after them, after the Muhajirin, the first of the Muhajirin and the first of the Ansar, after they brought iman, those that brought iman later on, after them, and they made hijrat in the path of Allah, they also migrated and they made jihad with you. Allah Ta'ala says, فَأُولَٰئِكَ مِنْكُمْ, they also from amongst you. وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَى بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. And the relatives, they are closer to one another in the book of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Meaning those that are close relatives to one another, they will now inherit from one another. It is because of this verse that the previous verse was abrogated, where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned that the Muhajirin and the Ansar, they will inherit from one another. It is through this verse that law was abrogated. Allah Ta'ala mentioned, Inna Allah bi kulli shayin alim. Verily Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has full knowledge over everything. The surah after this is known as Surah At-Tawbah or Surah Al-Bara'ah. It is mentioned the surah has approximately 13 names, but they are famously known with two names. One is Surah At-Tawbah, Tawbah because the Tawbah of the mu'mineen are accepted. Allah Ta'ala makes mention of this in this particular surah. And Bara'at means to be totally freed, totally absolved. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has nothing to do with the kuffar. Allah Ta'ala mentions here that He's got nothing to do with the kuffar whatsoever. So these are the two names that this surah is known by. But if you look in the beginning of this surah, which is in the 10th para, that there is no Bismillah written in the beginning of this particular surah. So the ruling in regards to Bismillah is, if a person is reciting from Surah Anfaal, where we came to an end now, Inna Allah bi kulli shayin alim. So if a person was reading from Surah Anfaal and then he starts the surah Bara'atum min Allahi wa Rasuli, then he will not read Bismillah and he will just continue. But if a person commences recitation from the surah, he stopped by the last surah, he ended off his recitation. And now he commences his recitation from the beginning of the surah, from Bara'atum min Allahi wa Rasuli. Then he will read A'udhu, Bismillah, and then he will commence his recitation. What is the reason that Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim was not written over here? It is mentioned that whenever Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam had come down or would come down with the verses of the Quran Sharif, then Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam would also come down with Bismillah in the beginning of a surah. Wherever surah commences, he would say that here Bismillah has to be written as well. In this particular instance, when this surah was revealed, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim was not sent down with Jibreel alayhi salam. In fact, Jibreel alayhi salam would actually point out where a certain verse of the Quran Sharif would fit in. That he would say, after this verse of the Quran, this verse will now fit in over here. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim never came down with this particular surah. That is why Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he had put the Quran Sharif into book form, at that time Uthman radiallahu ta'ala was in doubt that why is it that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is not written over here. So he said that there could be two things. One is either this is a continuation of another surah, and it seemed like it's a continuation of the previous surah, Surah Anfaal, and this surah has been brought immediately after that. That is why Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is not written. And otherwise it could be an independent surah also, but Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is not written. Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala used to say that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in there is the protection of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And in this surah Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is saying that he's got nothing to do with the kuffar whatsoever. So there is no protection whatsoever for the kuffar. So these are the various reasons that have been given why Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is not written in the beginning of Surah Al-Bara. We'll continue from here, inshallah.